Okay, so what happened?
What do you mean?
What happened with the crash?
What crash?
I did not take it out of the store.
More, don't do that.
I did not take it.
Yeah, I don't know what it was.
Criminals aren't particularly smart and often resort to foolish actions to avoid the police. Here are 4 cases where criminals tried to evade the cops by playing dumb, starting with this young man who was telling all lies to the cops.
Your hands on your back now. I'm not asking. No.
On January 2nd, 2023, an officer conducted a routine traffic stop on a vehicle that had a brake light that was broken. Upon approaching the driver, the officer noticed the driver acting unusually strange, raising suspicions that something wasn't right.
Hey, I'm Officer Arts. It's only police department. Hey,
The insurance is unconfirmed on
reach the stops. You got a brake light out, man. Sorry, I was having a hard time catching
Who
it.
had a what?
You got a brake light out. Well, hey, man, because it's a traffic stop, I need your driver's license, okay?
I'd like to give me some water.
Hey, no. Hey! Hey!
He tried to excuse himself from the cop's presence, saying he needed to get water. However, the cop intervened and stopped him immediately.
I'm deaf. I can't freaking hear. What is that?
Okay.
I can't hear nothing he's
Okay,
saying.
well, hey, he was driving, so I need his driver's license, but he said he doesn't have one on him. Does he have a driver's license?
His next move was to come across as deaf, but from his articulate responses, it was clear his ears were perfectly functioning. His next course of action further fueled the cop's suspicions.
Okay. What's your name? Hey,
Number 1, 522 West Marshall.
You all right?
Yeah, that's why
You
we
got a
going to
male
the
laying on the
doctor.
street face down to hear this.
Okay.
Oh,
Hey, dude, no.
look, I want them to food. I'm so serious, mister. I'm not trying to.
He transitioned from having to drink water to claiming he had diarrhea, but the skeptical cop wasn't buying it and didn't let him out of sight for even a moment. The suspect continued with his antics, but his attempts were unsuccessful. When the cop requested the insurance paperwork, they initially claimed it wasn't in the car, but later had someone send it digitally through a phone. The cop proceeded to run the suspect's name through their database, and what he found out was shocking to say the least.
Your warrant hit out of Harrison County for violation of probation.
Armed with this new information, the cop requested for backup immediately and proceeded to conduct a pat-down on the suspect to ensure his own safety. However, what unfolded next was nothing short of shocking.
Your hands on your back now. I'm not asking. No.
60, I got one running. North on call.
He left the cop dead in his tracks, making us wonder what he had on his person that was so bad that he had to flee. He was later spotted and apprehended with the help of police backup. He resisted arrest, but was later taken into custody and charged with resisting arrest search and evading arrest. The suspect in this case only faced mostly misdemeanor charges. This was not the case at all with the next suspect, as she faced far dire charges.
Okay, so what happened?
What do you mean?
What happened with the crash?
What crash?
On October 10th, 2022, a police officer responded to a call regarding an intoxicated woman who drove her car and crashed it into a building. Upon arriving at the scene, it came as a significant shock to the officers to discover that the suspect who drove the vehicle fled the scene. However, they proceeded to question the homeowners to gather information about what really happened.
So you didn't see the crash, you heard it,
No, I heard it and I looked and there was a car against my house.
and then you saw her get out, you helped her
Oh,
out.
she wanted to get out. I didn't care if she got out, wanted to look around, but she just headed down the alley.
Okay, did you follow her to her house?
No, I recognized her after a while. I hadn't seen her dressed up like that before.
Oh, so you know who she is. What did she look like, the one driving?
Dark hair,
Dark hair,
nice looking girl.
nice looking girl.
The officers have gotten a description of the suspect and proceeded to search the interior of the crashed vehicle, where they discovered the suspect's ID, revealing the suspect's name and picture. Shortly afterward, the suspect was found seated in the passenger seat of another vehicle, attempting to leave the area.
Hi there.
How you doing?
Not too bad, are you guys? The reason I ended up pulling you guys over, you guys were coming from that area over there. Did you end up just getting in a crash? No.
Not me.
Okay, did you?
No, we live around there, but
Yep.
yeah.
What's your name?
My name?
Yep.
Stacy.
Stacy.
Yeah.
So if I run that black car, the registered owner is not going to come back to you or him?
The black car.
That hit the tree?
What do you mean?
The suspect tried to play dumb, but the police already knew who they were looking for. When Stacy was asked to step out, her staggering and inability to balance clearly showed the officers it was a DUI case.
So,
No problem.
are you ready to be honest with me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened?
What do you mean?
What happened with the crash?
What crash?
You ended up hitting a tree. Do you remember that?
No.
No?
She kept playing dumb, despite the police officer being aware of the truth and the actual events. It's a common tactic amongst law enforcement to seek a confession from the suspect, even when the facts of the case are clear. This approach simplifies the prosecution process, but this suspect remained unyielding.
Your car, where should that be right now?
Probably close to my house.
Close to your house?
Yeah.
What do you mean close to your house?
Well, we're at my house. I mean,
Once you know where your car
Why
is?
are you asking me that right now?
Stacy, once you know where your car is? If somebody asked me where my car was, I'd be like, if I'm home, it's at home.
Well, my car should be at my house now.
Okay, that's not what you said. You said it should be close to home.
Well, why are you questioning me about that?
Because I want you to tell me the truth, Stacy. And
I'm going to tell you the truth.
Another officer intervened, attempting a good cop, bad cop approach to coax her into confessing.
Well, the house that you crashed into, they talked to you and tried to get you to stay there.
Well, I didn't crash into anybody's neighbors.
Your car is stuck in their house.
Well, that's hearsay. Am I going to go to jail?
Let's just worry about job one here, which is explain to us.
But I honestly want to know, am I going to go to jail?
We are not there yet. We haven't decided any of that.
I please don't want to go to jail.
Okay.
I really don't want to.
Okay.
I have a good lawyer.
That's totally fine.
Frustrated by her ongoing denial, the police changed tactics. Noting her clear intoxication, they decided to charge her with DUI and conduct a field sobriety test, to which her response wasn't surprising.
But why would I do testing if I wasn't driving? I mean, I really appreciate everything that you do.
Because you were, Stacy. That's...
No, I was not driving.
I'm not going to argue with you about that.
My dad was driving.
Right now what you can do is you can give me an answer on whether you would want to do some field testing right now.
No, I don't want to, because he's the guy that was driving
Her refusal to consent to a field sobriety test gave the police officers the authority to proceed with her arrest. She kept crying the whole ride to jail and repeatedly requested to speak with her dad. Eventually, the police officer agreed and made a conversation with her father possible.
Hello?
Dad.
Oh, Stacy.
Dad, please come and get me.
Come and get you?
Yeah.
Let him know he'll be picking you up from the jail, though.
I know.
Where's your purse?
It's at the police station. I did something stupid.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
All right, are you ready to be released then?
The conversation revealed how poorly she was raised and how her father never allowed her to face the consequences of her actions. Eventually, she was charged with OWI, hit and run, and fleeing the scene of a crash. If you thought Stacy was dumb, you should see this next criminal.
Her vehicle is non-drivable and you can't really explain to me when or where you hit something. The way you keep ignoring me. Okay.
On August 17th, 2022, police officers in Alachua County conducted a traffic stop on a woman, Holly Hunter, following multiple reports about her vehicle sustaining significant damage on the side. The officer was quite shocked when he saw the damage on the car and noticed children in the back seat. Little did he know about the kind of person he was about to deal with.
Okay. Well, we're just trying to figure out what... Yeah, it like lost control. It's been pulling. It's a rental car, and it's been pulling to the right and the left. Like, I don't know if the drive shaft is...
Okay, well, it definitely looks like you hit something.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, but it was pulling to the right. I don't know if it was one of the cones or what, because it happened so fast. I was trying to remain control over it.
Her statements, which show ignorance of the vehicle's severe damage, were quite suspicious and worrying. A damage of that magnitude typically occurs from a significant collision. Her lack of awareness also raised suspicions. She either wasn't being truthful or might have been under the influence. The officer got the kid to safety. However, upon initiating a more thorough interrogation of the woman, he began to sense something was off.
Well, do you remember hitting anything? Because you definitely hit something. The whole back axle's broke.
The back axle?
Well, I mean, something's broken. The whole tire's crooked.
Yeah.
And all this damage here.
Yeah. I didn't hit nobody other. I didn't hit no other car.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was like one of the cones or what. But
That's more than a cone.
yeah. Well, I didn't hit a tree or anything because I was on the far left lane.
She repeatedly stated that the incident happened quickly and she was unsure of the details. The officer called EMTs to check the children after the crash. Her constant claims of ignorance soon exhausted the officer, prompting him to ask more pressing questions.
So, ma'am, have you had anything to drink today?
No, absolutely not.
Would you object to taking any field sobriety examinations to dispel any kind of
I don't smell like alcohol.
I'm just asking if you would, to dispel any reason for me to believe that you're under the influence.
No. I mean, I don't have an issue with that, but
Okay.
I don't think that's the time right now for any of that. 'Cause I'm not alcohol. You can smell my breath. You can smell whatever.
She urged the cop to smell her breath for any alcohol, a move indicating she might be concealing something. Driving under the influence isn't limited to consuming alcoholic beverages. It involves operating a vehicle while impaired by alcohol or drugs. Her attempt to divert attention from being drunk overlooked the possibility of drug intoxication, which wouldn't necessarily leave a scent on her breath.
I mean, I don't mind, but I'm not under the influence.
Okay.
You can smell my breath. I don't have any alcohol.
Well, wait, and other than just smelling your breath, I have other tests that I could administer if...
The questioning continued, and she was as elusive as ever, unwilling to disclose details about the crash. Eventually, she consented to an HGN eye test, which proved inconclusive, which then made the cop double down on other field sobriety tests.
Right now, based on the accident and based on, the way you've been acting, and we're just going to do these field sobriety exams and we're going to go from there, okay? I can't tell the future.
You can smell my breath. I'm not on no field
So
sobriety.
this is what we do by policy. It doesn't say smell your breath, okay? I don't smell anything on your breath, so that'll go, I'll write that down, but...
If you used anything that would alter anything in your body?
No, not at all.
Subsequently, the cops chose to search through her bags, which should have been their initial action.
Okay, well, what is it? Because usually you don't see stuff like this.
I'm trying to help you. What is
She can search, just keep your hands behind her.
Just tell her.
Okay, you guys are sitting here attacking me.
We're not attacking you.
I'm trying to let her do her job. You're not helping.
You're not. Nobody's helping me do anything. I'm sitting here. Tell me what it is, and I'll get it out.
She persistently attempted to obstruct the search, yet her efforts were futile as the officers discovered contraband. Later, they determined that the crash resulted from hitting a pole off US Highway 441. Consequently, Holly Hunter faced a multitude of charges, including DUI with property damage, fleeing the scene of an accident with property damage, child neglect, possession of a controlled substance, and possession of drug paraphernalia. If you thought criminals couldn't be any dumber, you have definitely not met the lady in the next case.
More, don't do that.
I did not take it.
Don't do it.
I did not take it out of the store. Stop, I didn't take it.
This all started when Florida police officers responded to a call from a loss prevention officer about a woman who had stolen $1,000 worth of cologne from a Saks Fifth Avenue store. As the cops approached the suspect, she got super defensive.
Hey, ma'am. Hey, you got a second? I need to talk to you.
Why?
About Saks Fifth Avenue.
What about it?
They say you stole something from them. I need you to come with me. I'm going to take it to custody right now.
I didn't take none out of Saks.
Her body language didn't do much to convince she hadn't done anything wrong. She persistently attempted to walk away as the police officer approached her and even hastened her pace before the police officer grabbed hold of her. The police officer hadn't fully grasped the situation or who he was dealing with, but her couple of words gave him an idea of that.
You at Saks, right?
Yes, I was there.
And what's the perfume that was taken from there?
I didn't
They have
take
it on
anything.
camera.
They don't have me take anything because I left it.
You left it.
I left them.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. I left them.
All right, where are they?
I left them intact. I didn't take them because I saw you.
Okay, wait a second. Hold on a second. Oh, because you saw him?
Yes, so I left them at the door.
She admitted to attempting to steal the merchandise, however, had a change of heart when she noticed the loss prevention officer nearby.
I didn't take anything. He was circling around me, so I just left.
Right, it's uncomfortable, right?
Yes, he always do. Every time I come in the store.
Interestingly, this wasn't her first rodeo in that exact store, which prompted the officer to be particularly vigilant regarding her. This raises the question why she would risk returning to steal from a store where she's already known for shoplifting. The police officer gained a better understanding of the situation and knew the necessary steps to take after consulting the loss prevention officer.
You swear to confirm you can tell me the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Fantastic. Tell me what happened, sir.
Okay, so I was sitting in women's shoes talking to another associate. I saw her walk in through our men's door, right? She's walking through, passing through jewelry, eyeballs me the whole way. I already knew something was up. The ladies in cosmetics are like, oh, they just took 2 bottles. I'm like, yeah, I know exactly who it is. I was just watching her. And then that's when I called my security to see if they could possibly locate her.
So you got the two, is it the $500 bottle or two $500 bottles? Is it possible we can have footage of her actually doing it?
For sure. I have a camera pointed right at her.
Despite the police officer requesting the video footage, he still chose to be nice, attempting to reason with the suspect and resolve the matter in a non-confrontational manner. However, she was unwilling to cooperate and kept sticking to her story.
Security has it, they say you took 2 bottles of pre-Aventus. So what we can do is, he said if we don't get it back, they're going to prosecute because they got the footage.
It's in the store.
Where in the store, Miss?
I just left it on the counter. I didn't take it. I did not take it. I did not take it. I left it. He was standing right there. I didn't take it.
You been arrested before, Miss Moore?
Yes.
Just some stupid stuff?
Yes.
Maybe shoplifting in the past?
Yes.
Okay. So help me, Miss Moore. Help me understand why this time it didn't happen.
Because he was standing right there.
I don't want to jam you up anymore.
I stay jammed up, and I learned my lessons. When I see stuff like that, I don't do anything. Hardest times are.
However, it wasn't long before the LP officer retrieved the footage, and from that moment, things started to turn downhill for her.
And then I think she was trying to look for a little bag or something to put it in. And you see she walked away with the little black bag.
Okay, Ms. Moore, I just saw the video. Okay, and I do believe that it was taken. So I'll give you.
I took it?
Yes. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to, and I don't know where your friends went, the ones that were distracting the clerk. Did you hand it off to them?
I didn't even have no friends with me. Okay. No, I did not.
Okay, that's fine. It looked like there were some people that were trying to distract the clerk, but that's okay. Okay.
Can you please show me what you're talking about? Because that was a lie.
I just saw the video right now.
Can you show it to me?
It's called Discovery. You can see it in court.
I did not take anything. I did not take it.
Well, right now,
I left it there.
Okay.
What did you seen me take it?
Yeah, so you walked away with the black bag and kind of stuck it in there. I saw that.
You saw me take this up and put it in the bag?
Yes, where they had the display ones.
And I didn't leave it?
No, ma'am.
Okay, if you say so. Okay.
You don't need to see the rest because you were there.
No, I want to see me take it out the door. See me take it out the door.
Well, that's another camera, ma'am.
No, because I didn't take it out the door.
With the video footage evidence at the cop's disposal and her refusal to come clean, the officer's subsequent course of action didn't come as a surprise, but the same couldn't be said for hers.
He's lying. You're not listening to me. He's lying. Can you please tell him where the stuff is? I did not take it out of the store.
Or don't do that.
I did not take it.
Don't do it.
I did not take it out of the store. Stop, I didn't take it. I didn't take it. I didn't take it. I didn't take it. He's trying to arrest me for something I didn't do. I didn't take it. Help me. Help me. He's trying to say I took something I didn't take. He can't show you that I walked out the store with it. You did not see that. He said you can take anything in court. He's trying to arrest me for something I didn't take. That's not right.
Based on what we got, I have enough probable cause to arrest you. Okay? Now you can have your day in court. You know how that works. You ain't new to the game.
Yeah, but you have to walk out the door with something.
No, you don't. No, you do not.
That's stealing.
No, ma'am, you do not.
So you can just look at it?
Any attempt to conceal or deprive the owner.
I didn't conceal it. You saw me conceal it.
Yes, ma'am. It's on video. You're going to have your day in court.
You saw me conceal it. What did I conceal it in?
You saw the same video I did.
Yes, and what did you see? I didn't see anything being concealed.
In the United States, to be arrested for shoplifting, a person must have hidden store items on themselves or in a place they control, and the items must not belong to them. Even though the woman said she didn't have the items when she was arrested, a video showing her hiding the items earlier was enough reason for the police to arrest her. She was transported to the police precinct and later charged with shoplifting, grand theft, and resisting arrest. If you like this video, watch this one.